First of all, good morning, sir. I really want to start with a sincere congrats on the movie. For real. I want to start with that. I have so many questions and so much to talk about, but I like throwing a few curveballs at the beginning,
Yes.
which are some fun. You know this about me. So if someone has actually never seen, and I don't know who these people are, but if someone has never seen anything that you've done, what is the first thing you'd like them to watch and why?
You mean of the whole filmography?
Of everything.
I would say that either Shape of Water or Pan's Labyrinth would be great primers of what I do. But now Nightmare, if they could watch two, I would say Pan's and Devil's Backbone or Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley. Those are sort of the alpha and the omega of what I do.
You obviously, everyone knows you have a very nice collection of interesting things in your house and everywhere. Who knows where it's all at? What are some of the newest things you've added to your collection that you might want to tell us about?
Well, you know, like yesterday, for the first time in many months, I had an afternoon free and I needed to distract myself, and I painted a model. It was a model of I don't know if you're familiar with Mobius. Mobius is comic book Arsac.
I haven't read that. No.
Yeah, Arsac. There was a beautiful model done by Paul Harding, and he posted it on Twitter. And I said, "Would you please print me a copy of that?" And he sent me a 3D printing. And yesterday I was just all day painting the model, and now it's on a shelf, fully painted.
Please post a picture if you can. On
I'll post one on Twitter, I guess.
Yes, please.
It's not finished. I do one pass in one day because I'm very impatient, and then I go back and stipple and dry brush and do more flourishes and stuff like that. Yeah.
I think people will forgive you if it's not perfect.
Yeah, I hope they do.
Of all the films you've made, and you think back on them, what do you think ended up being the toughest shot to pull off, and why?
You know, the worst experience was Mimic. The worst. The most difficult have been Pan's and Nightmare Alley. Nightmare was such a monster because I'm being completely candid here. I thought this is a great screenplay, but it is technically not very complicated. It's, you know, just we're gonna design it and then let the actors play within the frame, and it's gonna demand my attention, but it's gonna be a fun shoot. This is how I went in. And then the movie turned out to be like riding a bull in every sense. The movie kept asking every day, he kept asking new questions of me, demanding complete answers in a way that no other material did, because it was a tonally really difficult movie. It was really the language I was trying with the camera, the language I was trying with the reality of it all was very different for me. And it was an incredibly wild ride, then complicated by every complication you would expect, whether stopping for COVID, restarting with COVID protocols, making that movie fit on a budget with the spectacle I thought it needed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can add all the et cetera you want. And then we ended up with a movie that was 3 hours 20 and had to compress it and distill it into 2 hours 19, you know?
Oh, I have so many follow-ups to that. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to because I love talking about the editing process, but I'll get to it in a few minutes. What are you, for people that have not seen the marketing, I guess what I want to say is, what are you most excited for people to see about Nightmare Alley and your take on this material?
Well, look, the first thing is the closest I've come tonally to this movie is Devil's Backbone, which was 80% realistic and realism, and 10-15% fantastical elements. This is all realism in the sense that it is a stylish movie. It is elegant. It is beautiful. It has the craftsmanship, but is not supported by a fantastical underpinning. There's no creatures, no ghosts, no fantastical elements, you know. And I think that is the thing that I'm addressing. And this is reality. I think it's a movie not about the past, but about today in every possible way. The notions, the themes, the anguish, the anxiety that the movie has is of today. And that is the thing I try to do, because noir is one of the two genres that more clearly reflects the time it was made on. Like horror is the other one. Horror and sci-fi fantasy. You know, you have the pulse of the Cold War in the noirs, and the pulse of the Cold War in the movies made at that time. Then you have the post-Vietnam horror and the post-Vietnam noirs. And then you have the 80s neo-noirs. And each of those eras is reflected in this genre. And I wanted to do a movie that was set in the past but spoke about today.
Obviously, you were heavily influenced by film noirs making this movie. Can you talk about some of your top film noir inspirations for looking at for Nightmare Alley?
Well, visually, I tried to move away from it. I tried to visually make it a movie that happened in the real world and not stylize it completely. We did follow up the chiaroscuro light of it all, but I tried to avoid any of the cliches like voiceover, slow turning fans, Venetian blinds, wet street walk by a detective in an overcoat, all the things that have become sort of the dead man wear no blade sort of cliches. We tried to avoid all that and reinvent it. But the influence, for me, noir is a very moral parable, a very moral oriented genre, which actually depends on the character's decisions to shape his destiny or her destiny, you know? And I was very influenced by, very rarely do you follow a character that you don't know if there is any possibility of redemption in the character. The one that comes to mind immediately is Too Late for Tears. Elizabeth Scott is fantastic in that movie because she is unstoppable. And we homage that movie by creating the same black bag with money that she has in the ending of that movie. There's Strangers on a Train. We homage the marquee of the carnival. It's exactly the same marquee than Robert Walker walks in Strangers on a Train. Other influences was Fallen Angel, the Otto Preminger Fox Noir. The cafe on the beginning is sort of a riff on that. But mainly it was the Otto Preminger noirs at Fox were the main influence. You know, you can see a very gritty, very dark reckoning morally for those characters. And I think that's what I wanted very much in this movie, that it felt like it addressed those moral questions of what happens when you have a populist lie all the way to the top, and then finding himself facing the truth at the end, you know?
100%. You obviously, what was it about actually the Nightmare Alley material that said, I want to remake this. This is something I want to spend 2 or more years of my life making.
Almost 4. Yeah, almost 4. I think first of all, I never ever thought about it as a remake, because what I was trying to address was the novel, and not only the novel, but the biography of the writer of the novel, William Lindsay Gresham, which basically is the central character of Nightmare Alley. You know, he left one of the notes he left posthumously was, I am Stan, you know, or Stan is me, you know. And I think when we were writing, Kim and I said, let's not refer at all to the first movie. Let's find our solutions through the novel and what we know about William Lindsay Graham's spiritual quest, because he was in a quest. He's a guy that was looking into Buddhism, tarot, psychoanalysis, even early Dianetics, yoga, physical culture. He was an incredibly curious mind that was fought on the Republican side, on the Lincoln Brigade in the Spanish Civil War. And that's where he heard about the geek for the first time. His wife left him and married C.S. Lewis of Narnia fame. You know, his life was, when he became very rich from Nightmare Alley, selling the rights, he spent it in a way that was completely irrational. But he was never completely happy, you felt. And part of it, what I wanted to show is a character that starts the movie with nothing and then gains 1, 2, 3 times possibilities of finding happiness, and he doesn't see them. He just thinks, oh, there must be more. There must be more. And I always say the idea of the nightmare being the flip side of the American dream. That's what made me want to go do this movie.
Yeah, it's that's one of the things that I loved about it, is that he's never satisfied.
Never.
And it's amazing because I don't want to get into specifics, obviously, but you know, there's a clear point where he is very successful and has everything, or has so much, and yet it's never enough.
No, there is, in fact, one of the things that I loved in the novel, and that we were looking for very pointedly, is a happy ending in the middle. There's that beautiful crane when he's leaving the carnival with the girl, the book, the code, everything. He has everything to be happy. And the crane goes to the sky and it's almost like a happy ending. And then you cut, and it's 2 years later, he has a lot of money and he's incredibly unhappy still. And now he's unhappy with the girl that he thought was the reason to live, you know, his reason to exist, you know. And I thought this is a really interesting character. The idea of success, which is something that you grapple with as an artist and as a storyteller, the idea of can you grapple with that and find happiness not in what you have, but in what you don't lack. That's a big difference. A rich man is not the man that has a lot of money. He's the man that can give most of what he has and be happy. You know, these are questions that were in my mind for the character.
For people that are actually, like, say, younger movie fans that are not familiar with the film noir genre, what are some of the movies that they should start with if they want to engage with that, with film noir?
Well, I think the hardest noir is, for me, the one that I like. I mean, I love Fallen Angel. I love Too Late for Tears, as I said. I love Detour. I love, in my opinion, all the Sam Fuller noirs are great. Where the Sidewalk Ends, Born to Kill, which is absolutely brutal even now, you know. There's curiosities, like there's 2 Mickey Rooney noirs that are really unforgiving with the main character, and they're very, very curious, you know. I think that I would start with the hardest ones because it's a genre that has a lot to offer in times of despair. Is That's the curious thing. It's a genre that should be very much in vogue right now, you know, because it's perfect for our times.
So one of the things that I loved about Nightmare Alley is that in all your movies, you tend to have monsters and creatures and everything else, but in this film, all the monsters are men. And
Yeah.
you know and I loved that. Can you sort of talk about that aspect of the film?
Well, look, the curious thing about Nightmare Alley is that is at the same time a big departure of what I do and perfectly in keeping with what I do. And in every movie I do, I always say the most brutal monster is man. And you know, I'm 57 and it was about time I tried to do it straight on, you know. I tried to do it without any of the metaphors and any of the um, parabolic figures of the monsters and just go and portrait a man. The difficulty with a movie like this is that you are following this character 99.9% of the time. We never lose sight of him. He is our guide in and out of every situation, every single scene. He comes out of him or he goes into it. And that's a very difficult exercise. That this is one of the things that made it so hard. How do we track this guy, where he is at, what he's thinking? Look, it came to be so crazy an exercise that often I said, we know more about this character if we keep him in the shadows. We know what he's thinking more if he's in the shadows or his back to us. And the camera just sees him thinking from behind. These are devices we thought about. Bradley, the cinematographer, and myself, we said, let's try that. Because obviously, you need the complicit partnership I had with Bradley to do this, because I would say, he would joke that I would put more light on the cyclopean unborn baby than on him, you know. And I said, well, there's a little bit of truth to that, and these are the reasons. And I think, and then we would joke with the cinematographer. We said, no light. This is a close-up for Bradley, you know. but I think that. But if you look at my characters, and I think the caretaker in Devil's Backbone is sort of Stan, you know, is a prince without a kingdom that believes he deserves more. The captain on Pan's Labyrinth is a little bit like that, and you know, I think that the only movie that comes to mind in the recent years is There Will Be Blood, where you follow Daniel Plainview so meticulously. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, you know.
100%. It totally works. I heard a rumor, and I want to know if it's true. First of all, Kate is fantastic in the movie. But I heard that the direction that you had her acting like she was in a film noir, and everyone else was given different instructions. Is that true?
Well, what I knew is that I needed a difference between the first half and the second half, you know? So what I said to Kate is, you should move as if you're a big cat. I said, like a tiger or a lion, you know? That's how carefully she moves in her space, you know? And then on the day I said, and then we're gonna crack that facade a little bit. But I thought, in my mind, the carnival needed to be almost neo-realistic noir, you know? And then you go to the city, and with the city, you get, like, the carnival has a very, very small orchestration on the score, to give you an example. And then you go to the city and the score becomes lush. And the carnival is full of warm colors, saturated reds, and there's no more red in the city. The only reds in the city are Molly's dress, blood, the lips of Lilith, and the Salvation Army sign. That's it. You can watch the movie as many times as you want. And those are the only reds. And the elevator light, I guess. But the idea is all warmth is left behind. And therefore, the city is very well represented by straight lines, by cold textures like steel, glass, mirrors, polished black floors, and Lilith. Lilith, the character, is the largest shark in the tank in the sense that Stan thinks he's a big fish, and the city puts him on his rightful place, you know? And I wanted with Kate to walk in the more genre elements of the movie, to bring in sort of an evocation of all those, great actresses in the 30s and 40s, you know? To me, one of the things we discuss is, unlike the noir, the traditional noir, the femme fatale meets a punishment or something goes wrong. And I said, let's make this an homme fatale. And let the three women not only survive him, but thrive after he's gone, you know? And basically the downfall occurs to him, you know? And I thought Kate had a very difficult act balancing the icy surface and the moments of vulnerability and anger and pain that the character has.
I love talking about the editing process, as you know, because that's ultimately where it all comes together.
Yeah, it's a typewriter.
Say it again?
It's the typewriter. That's where you write the movie for the first time.
Absolutely. So you mentioned you had a longer cut. What was the cut you had that you're like, I don't know how we're going to get this shorter? Do you know what I mean? Was it that 3-hour 19 version? You're like, oh, this is really good.
Yeah, well, look, I was perfectly happy with the movie at 3:15, but I knew, look, all it takes is to show it to somebody outside the circle, you know. I think all it takes is to show it to even 20 people, and you immediately feel the slowness or the vagaries of the story, you know. So we had to lose approximately 40 minutes of the carnival and approximately 20-30 minutes of the city, which was a big challenge. And I invited, as I always do, I invited the most immediate circle into the editing room and show those stints, try everything. My philosophy in the editing is you can and should try anything. And then if you don't like it, you can always undo it. That's the advantage of the digital. And then we switch things from one place to another and eventually ended up close to or far away from the original position of a scene or two. Those are what I call hinges. You know, if you move a hinge and the movie, let's say, for example, on the beginning, you know, to give you an example, Stan went to work for Xena a lot later than it is right now. A lot of more intervening scenes occurred in the middle. And I said, there is a progression there. We found if we move him forward and he's already working for her really quick, there's a hinge. The audience goes, oh, that changed. That's it, doesn't change. It's like now I'm ready to learn new things as opposed to I'm still on the old scene. I found that in the editing is not how long a movie is how many steps are between A and B and B and C. The brisker those steps, the better the movie moves. And at 2:19 is the only movie I've done that is more than 2 hours.
Oh man, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I've never done more than 2 hours. I'm always 1:59 max.
Sure. As a fan of Nightmare Alley and the performances and the cinematography and the production design and the list goes on and on and on, will you ever show those as like, will the stuff you cut, I guess, will I ever see it? Will fans ever see it?
I said it on the DVD of an earlier movie. I said the deleted scenes are deleted for a reason. And in the case of Nightmare Alley, they flesh out the characters sometimes in a direction that doesn't suit the rest of the narrative. If I could, in an ideal way, repace the movie, I would still pace it the way it is right now. You know, because I think what you should and what you end up with are two different things. If you wrote exactly the movie you shot and you shoot exactly the movie you edited, I really would take exception to that. I would say it's a very purgatorial exercise. You know,
I get it.
I think when the movie talks is when the movie's alive. For me, after 30 years of doing this, I find that the movies that are much more worthy of tangling with are the movies that talk back to you and say, we need this.
Let me ask you this question. What was the last thing that you cut out before you picture locked, and why?
I cut out little gestures. One of the things that I felt was extremely important. We knew that Stan was going to be silent for a long time, and his first words and where he speaks them for the first time was very crucial. And one of the last things that came out of the movie was he used to say a small line before he talks to the geek inside of the funhouse. And it felt too minor. And so, the ideal thing was to take it out and find a way for the scene to flow without it. That was both challenging and fun. And that was the last thing. He had a very small line where he accepts the job, basically, that Ron Perlman offers him. And it was challenging to cut around it, but we did. And when we go to the funhouse, that's the first time he talks is in the dark to the geek, which is basically a mirror, yeah, of his future. And the movie was pregnant with mirrors, circles, alleys, and it was so much better for me that the first time he spoke was in the darkness.
I've spoken to so many filmmakers, and they talk about how they wish they could have a break in the shoot to analyze the footage, see what they have, and then go forward. And unfortunately, with COVID, you shot for a little while, and then you had a very long break, and then you eventually started filming again. I'm curious, how did the film benefit from that shutdown, and how did things change as a result?
Well, look, first of all, it's kind of difficult for me to see this without the disproportionate dimension of the pandemic we had. Put everything in perspective. First of all, it became about keeping yourself and people safe, and that gave the break a calendar. We thought first it's going to be 9 weeks, and it wasn't. It was 6 months, and it was really within that stopwatch. Two things happened. I gained 60 pounds from COVID routine, which meant you went from the sofa to the kitchen and back to the sofa, for many, many months, because we could not cross the border. It was locked down in Toronto. And, that happened. And then the other thing that happened is we were able to play with the material of the second half of the movie, which is what we shot first, for a longer time. And Stan became clearer. And it became clearer what we needed on the first half to see him become the guy that we had already shot. You know, Bradley Cooper was able to lose about 15 pounds from the second half to the first part. I found those 15 pounds and more. Rooney gave birth to a baby. And when she came back, she was a different Molly, somebody more that felt really connected to the earth, really grounded. And the structure of the second half made it clear that everything in the movie was a prologue to the last 2 minutes, the last close-up. You know, it was written like that originally. In the screenplay, it says, and now comes the final shot, blah, blah, blah. And the camera doesn't cut, blah, blah, blah. But when you see the material, it became clear that everything was prologue to that moment, because that's the biggest difference between the two versions, if you may. One of the biggest differences is we see almost relief at the end in his situation. He finally knows who he is, you know, as opposed to the first version, which is an almost biblical punishment to him.
Yeah, I will, for people that are watching, I will not spoil the ending. I will just say the ending is fucking awesome. And that shot is phenomenal. And I don't want to say more than that until people have seen it, but that is a shot. I say bravo, sir, on that final shot.
No, it was very tempting. It was very tempting to add this or add that. That's the thing. One of the things the movie did that was so curious, man, because I've never had that. I caught Shape of Water in silence without temp score. And I caught this mostly without temp score, but it rejected score. The movie said, no, 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 no. And it took more than a year to find where and how much the score was needed, you know?
Yeah, the ending is so good in this. And it's because, man, I don't want to say it, because you are, the whole movie is building towards that ending, which you don't, anyway, I don't want to talk about it because I want people to see it.
The thing that, you know, when you have a fantasy element, you have whimsical elements that come with it. There is already an ingenuity in a character that doesn't exist or a situation that doesn't exist that allows the mind to escape. And what happened in this movie is actually we distill it as the movie goes. It becomes more and more distilled, and then you start the movie with a guy alone, and you end the movie with a guy alone in a different way. You know, it was very, for example, one element that was very, very much found in the editing, the dreams he has were more, we shot much more. We could have revealed this and that and connect, and we decided to make it a few images that almost repeat themselves, and they add one to the other until you understand what happened in that cabin in the opening shot. And that was the other thing. You say, what was the last thing you subtracted or added? You know, there was the second shot of the movie, which is not the shot that is there, was a beautiful crane, gorgeous, gorgeous shot. It went from him to his feet to a gasoline can, followed the trail of gasoline into a body. It was really amazing. And it was the second shot of the movie, but it felt like a shot. It was so good, but it was very showy. And that went because you could not start the movie like that. There was a power and a simplicity to the first shot. And then the shot of the burning cabin that demanded sort of a pared down sensibility to it.
I thought that you and Dan did such a great job working together on the visual aesthetic of the film. And
Yeah.
you've already touched on some of the colors and everything else, but could you sort of talk about a little bit more the aesthetic of how you wanted the film to look and working with Dan to achieve that?
Well, one of the things that people, when the movie is available for home, and one of the things that I beg people, if they can do it, is to watch the movie in black and white. Because what we did is we used very traditional cross lighting. So that the movie is lit like a black and white movie, and was art directed with a lot of reds and greens and gold, which gives you all the midtones in the gray, right? So it was almost like a black and white movie that was done in color, like a serigraph. Like imagine that you're printing the ink layer, that's the black and white, and then you print the color layer, that's the movie that you saw. That was one of the things we said, let's do cross lighting, like in the traditional movies. We lowered the ceilings in a lot of the scenes, so the camera was able to see the characters and the ceiling. The ceilings were a little over 6 feet tall, but so they were very present. And then we decided to shoot the movie as much as possible in one-ers. Like there's a lot of shots that are a single shot, and it's staged with the actors like a movie from the 40s, you know? Actors come close and away from the lens, the camera follows them to and from a thing. And that is also a decision that has to do with the fact that it's how this guy is illuminated by the characters. We thought, let Bradley be a negative space, like a black hole lit by different characters, that we give him 3 fathers and we give him 3 mothers, so to speak, and they illuminate him in the middle as a negative space. And we needed to keep the integrity of that choreography to say, it's all about these interactions. It's not just about style, it's about, let's preserve the interaction between him and the characters.
It's interesting you say watching it in black and white. I would love to do that, but I don't necessarily know that when it eventually comes out, I guess maybe on Blu-ray, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but is that something that you're thinking about in terms of, because it's hard on the streamers, they generally don't give you that option.
I would love to, yeah, I would love to. And we are exploring the look of that. I watched, one of the things that happened during the pandemic is that I started watching the dailies when we came back. I watched them in black and white on my MacBook. I went to grayscale and I watched them. I started watching all the dailies in black and white. And I finally started to publicly say, you guys should look at it this way, because that was how Dan and I would squint in the monitor and love the lighting, because we were reproducing a very expressionist lighting in the night that was keeping all the midtones.
Yeah, I loved the cinematography and the look. One of the things that I felt, and I was saying this to someone, is that watching the movie, I just felt transported to like another time and place. I never thought about real life. I never thought about my phone. I just was captivated beginning to end. And one of the reasons is because the carnival is just so well built and designed. Yeah. And that whole, I just disappeared into it. Can you sort of talk about creating that on obviously a budget, because you're not making some Marvel movie with this material? You obviously have a finite amount of money.
No, yeah, in the last few years, you get period movies that cost up to 150, 160 million, blah, blah, blah. And, we knew we were a Searchlight movie. We had a budget that we needed to do by very judiciously building big sets when it was needed. We had sets that were amazing. Lilith's office, Grindel's office, the Copacabana back, all the dressing rooms and all that. But we also scouted very, very carefully. And then what we decided early on with wardrobe, production design and the art department, they said, let's layer that really, really, really well. Let's not have just guys in suits and fedoras and women in clothes for the city clothes. We layered everything. I went on eBay myself and I started buying props and set dressing that I brought to the movie, that I made sure there was an accurate. I bought all the bills, all the cash that appears in the movie, I bought first. I wanted to find the cash that looked used. I got lighting fixtures in Lily's office, bending machines, blah, blah, blah. And when you go to a carnival, you have to get the period popcorn bags, the period balloons, the period strings for the balloons, the period carnival prizes. If you see a wall of Cupid dolls, you have to get Cupid dolls from the period. You have to get a period carnival merry-go-round. You have to, the fastenings on the tent are made of leather and brass machined for the period. The way you hang the banners, everything, there was no modern hardware. All the kitchen, the cooking implements, and then we had to differentiate the way people dressed in the urban environment in the city and the way people dressed in the carnival. And we used layers. We had people in leather jackets. We had people in denim jackets. We had women in working clothes. We had women in their best Sunday clothes. It was so layered. And then we had to choose every single prop and run it against sort of, you would say, a system that qualified it and said, yeah, it's of the period. We cannot be inaccurate. Then just layering the props with the characters. All the women needed to have a little handbag. All the men needed to have a handkerchief. Because back then you had to have it. And that's one of the things that I tell you. Two things I'm marveled at Bradley, because I think this is a very different role than anything he's ever done. One of the first things I said to him is, you had to take boxing. And he went into boxing lessons, and he was in the ring a couple of times a week, because I said, if you went through depression, if you went through hopping trains in the 30s, you got physical. And the way a guy that had been on the lam or broke at that time included us, the way he owned the physical space and the way he would own a confrontation, blah, blah, blah. And he did it. He went full on. The other thing he did, which is absolutely marvelous to watch, is the way he handles cigarettes and the fedora. The way he puts it on, the way he folds it, straightens the brim, the way he picks it up, the way he picks up and holds a cigarette, which is completely of the period. And he does it in two styles: the sophisticated smoker in the second half and the not sophisticated smoker in the first. And he kept track of all these little things. And I tell you, those things are invaluable. The way you layer the period with not just the props and the sets, but the gestures. The way, for example, Kate talks is not an imitation, but she completely delivers a sort of mid-Atlantic, very polished accent.
Oh, they're both fantastic. Do you think that Bradley, his experience directing has changed him as an actor? Because, oh, sorry.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, if you ask me, Bradley's a director that acted. It's a guy that you can talk. He knows exactly what the lens is looking at. Yes, that's one advantage. Like he would say, do you want me to cross the lens? He always stayed in the composition. He knew where the shot ended and where his physical space started. All that is great, but also what is amazing is then you have a partner in the whole process. This is not a guy that is worried about his part. He knows exactly where in the movie this is, what it means, why do it in a oneer and not in coverage, why there will be no close-up here, or why he will reject the close-up and say, I think it played on the wide, and I go, I think you're right, let's move on. That's never happened to me. And there was no wrangling expectations because he knows where the direction is going. You're not wrangling the expectations of a star. You're actually, you have a full partner that understands editing, lighting, everything is. I think we say this jokingly, we went through a 10-year friendship in 3 years. We are now friends for life, and we've gone through every up and down there is in the book.
Because I'm basically out of time, I'm just going to ask you one last thing. Just as a fan of your work, I know you're hard at work at Pinocchio, and obviously I cannot wait to see it. For fans of yours, what would you like to tease them about the project? What do you want them to know about Pinocchio?
Well, look, it's a very, 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 very personal movie for me. The flip sides for me have always been Pinocchio and Frankenstein, of the same story, because essentially that's the same story, and the idea of a Pinocchio that talks about things that I consider very deep, but it's fun and it's a musical at the same time. But I find it really, really incredibly moving. Obviously, in animation, you get to see the movie in storyboards beginning to end many, many times, and then you add the stop motion. And right now we are about 50% animated and 50% in storyboards. And every time I watch the movie, I just sob like a baby. It's as personal as it gets, as moving as it gets, and it's unlike any other version of the story you've ever seen. It's completely unlike it, and it subverts the moral underpinnings of the original fable, which is, in order to be a real boy, you gotta change, and you gotta become flesh and blood, and you gotta become. This is about becoming a real boy by acting, a real human, I would say, by acting like a real human. Period.
Do you think it'll be out like a year from now, or?
Oh yeah, no, the movie will come out last quarter of 2022. So it's curious because it's been almost 5 years since Shape of Water, and now it's going to be 2 movies in a row, one after the other.
I fucking love it. I'm just being honest with you.